Petri Dish is a product of Petri Dish Media, all rights reserved. All characters during the show, such as Donatella Iglesias, Jimmy Coconuts, and Tyler Jerry, are copywritten and are satirical. Any similarity to any persons living or dead is completely coincidental. Petri Dish is a science comedy podcast and should not be used as medical advice. Do not get medical advice from a podcast.
And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein
Science! Science!
I know the human being and
Science!
can coexist peacefully.
This was thou findest.
Hey guys, this is Petri Dish. I'm Nathan.
I'm Sean.
We're going to talk about a super important subject, something that I dream about every night, which is aging, mortality, immortality, death. We have a lot of old Democrats right now, and so we have to discover, is there a way to keep them alive through even a single term?
Yeah, I guess that'd be useful. It depends on which one it is.
But this could also be used for evil. Donald Trump could listen to this pod and use our secrets.
Oh, that's true.
Because Sean is going to release some secrets.
Yeah, I'm going to try. So this is going to be a two-parter. And so this...
There's a lot to talk about.
Right.
Age-old question.
This initial part is going to talk about what is aging.
You'd be surprised.
Well, yeah. So what do you think aging is? Like, what does aging mean to you?
I guess, like, as you get old... your like skin sags and you get crow's feet that are deeper, and you're more likely to get diseases. You'll forget things, and you eventually just kind of croak.
Yeah, because, I think for some people, the way that they think about aging is just like, it's the passage of time.
Yeah.
And that's inevitable.
Well, but what if time is a flat circle?
Yeah.
What did happen to that now?
Thank you, McConaughey. That was beautiful. Well delivered. And so in that sense, like, kids age into adulthood and everything like that, right?
Right.
But that's not really the kind of aging anybody gives a shit about. When we talk about aging that people care about, we're talking about the shitification of human beings. It's like
Is that like an Egyptian term, or did you just use shit to me? I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
I thought it was just silt accumulating on the Nile. I wasn't sure what you were talking about.
Yeah, similar to sedimentation.
Right.
Shitification.
Yeah. You get covered in shit.
Yeah, and it is this slide into decrepitude that I think people are most worried about. And that's the thing that people want to figure out.
Decrepitity was the most beautiful Egyptian queen. Okay. One of the reasons I'm really looking forward to this episode is that every 2 weeks I read some other pop science article that's like, this jellyfish lives forever, this Czechoslovakian lives forever, whatever, this octopusy. So what is it about aging that is actually curable, or we can actually overcome? We shall not grow old, Sean. How are we not going to grow old?
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, let's get into it. Do we have to age? And I think that the idea...
Yes.
Well, so, it's complicated because there are like fucking ginkgo trees out there that are like greater than 1,000 years old, and...
yeah, but ginkgo trees do not pick the apple and eat the apple, Sean, okay? So they don't have to age.
Jeez. Is that an Adam and Eve
They are not ashamed of their nakedness, the ginkgo tree.
You don't know. That could be.
Then it'd be torturous because they can't control their leaves.
But see, here's the thing, is that there was this study recently, right? So, like, there are some really old-ass ginkgo trees.
Okay, yes.
Okay? But scientists did a study where they looked at the cells in these ginkgo trees, and they found that the ones that were 1,000 years old and the ones that are, like, 10 years old have pretty much indistinguishable cells.
Oh, that's weird.
As far as, like, any metric we have for aging. So, just goes to show that the sort of thought that there's kind of this inevitability and that things have to get worse and things eventually will break down does not necessarily hold up across all of life.
Well, wait, though. I want to examine this point.
Yeah.
If you took, really, though, if you took, like, the cell of a baby and the cell of a 90-year-old,
yeah,
it wouldn't be that different, right?
They'd be pretty different.
Oh, they would?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, first of all...
So what's so fucked up about us?
Right.
That's the episode.
That is an excellent segue, Nathan. So, the thing is that there are 9 kind of markers of aging, biologically speaking.
Okay. Wah, 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 wah. So number 1.
Oh, yeah, okay. That was a fun sound. So number 1 is genomic instability. And so your genome is your DNA, right? And it's got all your genes on it. And instability means it starts to go poopy.
Right. You can imagine your double helix, and it's like, and stuff starts falling off it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the accumulation of mutations in a lot of these genes and a lot of the parts of your DNA that are not necessarily genes but control how well those genes get read.
Okay.
You start to have just like whole parts of your chromosomes pop off and just like fall apart.
Jeez.
And so there's a lot of different ways that we know that that's related to aging. For example, there is a disease called progeria.
Yeah, that's like, it's like young people who look way older than they're supposed to, right?
Yeah. Wasn't there somebody with progeria in the movie Akira?
Oh, I mean, my reference is that there's a South African artist for a while who had progeria, and I say for a while because they tend to pass away pretty young.
Right, because it is a rapid aging disease. And in that, basically, there's just one mutation that can happen in the zygote before the embryo's even formed, right? So like the sperm and the egg come together, you have a little zygote, one mutation happens, and that makes it so that this protein that's used to make the nucleus in a cell, that's where the DNA gets housed, that protein gets fucked up.
God, don't drink and drive.
What the shit?
What, you saying that's bad advice?
No, that's good advice.
Sean wants you to drink and drive,
That just has
people.
fucking nothing to do with what I'm talking about.
Well, how do you think the mutation happened? Someone was drinking and driving.
It's just random chance. It's just random chance. And basically their nuclei get all messed up, and so the DNA doesn't get kind of housed properly.
Wow.
And that is sufficient to cause progeria and cause this rapid aging.
Damn.
And so
But it still doesn't happen very often. It's like a pretty rare disease, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a rare disease. But the main point of that is that it kind of illustrates how it kind of mimics the idea of aging, because they have this premature aging. And so you could imagine in actually old people that they might have similar issues in their cells.
Right. So this disease is useful proof that the instability structurally of your genetics, your genome, can really fuck you up.
Because, I mean, these people are passing away in, like, their teens from, like, a stroke or a heart attack or something. So, you know, it's pretty rough.
Stacy looks so concerned. Don't worry, Stacy, I don't have progeria. I'm going to be all right.
Yeah, look at you. You're in your 20s, baby.
That's true.
Looking good.
Feeling my 40s, but I don't have progeria. Just a bad lifestyle.
Kind of final point on genome instability. It's also a hallmark of cancer. And obviously getting cancer can cut your lifespan pretty seriously.
Well, that makes sense, right? Because the whole point of cancer cells is that they're mutating a whole shit ton, right? So it's like, structurally, you'd get unstable.
Right.
Okay. Number 2.
Number 2 is sort of related. It's telomere attrition.
I wrote a whole script about telomeres once.
Oh, yeah?
It was called Osmosis Jones 7. Rage Against the Age.
Oh, my God. Osmosis Jones is your Rickroll. You get me, like, every single time. I never see it coming.
It's funny how we're brothers, and we're only 4 years apart, and yet Osmosis Jones has, like, so much more featured in my worldview
I
than
don't
yours.
think I've seen it.
What? I forget every episode you haven't seen it.
Holy shit. Anyway, so do you know what telomeres are then?
Yeah, they're like the little dudes that maybe cause aging. Why are you laughing at me?
That's as good as you got. This whole episode's about aging, and I bring up telomeres. That's the best definition you have?
Yeah, it is. That's all I got.
So telomeres are the DNA region at the end of your chromosomes. So, you know, your chromosome, if it's shaped like an X or whatever, right, that means that there's going to be 4 ends to that. And at each one of those ends is a telomere. The thing about the way that DNA gets replicated, so every time your cell divides, it needs to make all new DNA to go into the new daughter cell and everything. Every time that the cell divides your DNA up and replicates it, the telomeres actually get a little bit shorter, just because of the way that DNA replicates.
Bummer. Okay.
And one could imagine that if they just kept getting shorter and shorter, eventually you'd get to some part of your chromosome you care about. Or the chromosomes would have so much lost at their ends that you'd start to see really goofy shit happen, like your cells thinking that it's damaged DNA and trying to repair it and doing all kinds of terrible things.
Okay. I think I remember the reason I heard about these is that lobsters have like 18,000 telomeres in the back pocket. In one little claw.
There is an enzyme called telomerase, and telomerase will re-lengthen telomeres. So it'll kind of make them longer again. kind of staving off the issue, right?
Okay.
So there are some animals, like lobsters, that restore their telomeres using telomerase. And so their chromosomes never really get shorter. And if we do the same kind of thing in mice, if we turn on the telomerase in mice using genetic engineering, those mice can live longer.
That's cool.
So it's kind of thought like, okay, maybe there's a little something there, right? A lot of cancer cells have telomerase turned on so that they can restore their telomeres.
Okay, well, wait a minute. That's some bullshit. So
What?
cancer cells know how to do that, but our own cells don't do that?
Yeah, so we have the enzyme. It's just we turn it off after kind of the early development part of our lives. Except for maybe in some stem cells.
That sounds like some unintelligent design right there. Like, that sounds like a really douchey god
Well, yeah.
who did that.
Yeah, bring it up with the big guy upstairs. It's not my fault.
Like, why haven't we already done human trials on this?
Because it's genetic engineering. We just haven't got there yet.
What about CRISPR? I thought we got CRISPR guys now.
So I do think that CRISPR could potentially be used to turn on telomerase.
Sean, I just don't want to die. We need to figure this out fast. I can tell we're not quite there yet.
So one thing I do want to say is that telomere loss is sometimes brought up in intro bio classes or like in some kind of bio class in college or something as like a hook to get students interested.
It's not necessarily as important as
Right.
pop science would imply.
Right. There are some animals where if you turn on telomerase and you have them kind of grow out these telomeres longer, the amount of their lifespan you can increase is pretty negligible. Maybe people who live to be 100 would live to be like 105 or something. It's really not kind of the immortality thing that sometimes it's pitched as.
But lobsters are immortal, and they've got telomerase up the kazootie.
Yeah, lobsters are a little complicated. They're sort of immortal-y, but they're
Like
crustaceans.
elves from Lord of the Rings. Like, they're immortal, but not in the good way, because they can get stabbed by Sauron.
Right, they can get stabbed. Yeah. Yeah, well, the other problem is that lobsters molt. They're crustaceans, so they have their hard shell.
Right.
And the older a lobster is, the bigger it gets. And bigger lobsters have a harder time molting because their shells are so thick and heavy.
Right.
So lobsters eventually die of quote-unquote old age, but it's because molting becomes unsuccessful.
Wow, so they just try to molt and just don't make it.
Yep.
And then probably while they're defenseless, something just eats them.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
That's why old age would be in quotes there, right?
Isn't
Like
that kind of basically humans too, though? Is like humans basically just get older and older till like they can't get out of bed and then someone stabs them while they're defenseless.
that's
Like, that's how nursing homes work, right?
that might be like like English kings and shit like that.
yeah. That's the monarchical succession.
Yeah, but no, I think otherwise we actually do get progressively shittier as time goes on.
Sure, whereas they don't necessarily get progressively shittier. It's the external factor of their shell being heavy and them
Right.
getting bigger.
Because they keep getting bigger and bigger, and just at some point,
Their genes are the same
Yeah.
and are fine.
Yep.
That's a design flaw.
yeah, a little bit. All right, you're gonna give me your funky sound again?
Oh, bow, 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 bow.
Thank you.
Step 3, bitch. Or number 3.
Yeah, number 3, epigenetic alterations.
You guys remember epigenetics?
Yeah, you fucking better.
That was not a fake episode. It's come back.
Yeah, see? The thing about epigenetics is, like we said, that's kind of all of the stuff you can do to influence what genes get read and everything, besides actual mutations. And so definitely, as you age, you change what epigenetic modifications you have.
So why can't we epigenetically defuck ourselves? Why does epigenetics accelerate the fucking of self? Like, why can't we epigenetically repair our DNA?
Yeah,
Why does it only make it worse?
We should be able to. And in a certain sense, almost all of these things that I'm talking, telomeres and epigenetic alterations, you know, when a sperm and egg come together, you might imagine, like, well, shouldn't they have all the leftover shittiness of, like, the old person that made the sperm and the egg?
Right.
Like, shouldn't each generation have shorter and shorter telomeres or some kind of stuff?
Right.
But the fact is, at some point, we have this thing where telomerase turns back on. All of the epigenetics are wiped back out. The slate gets wiped clean again.
It doesn't completely get wiped clean, though, right? Because it wasn't...
There's a little bit of stuff that's left over,
But as much as possible.
Right, it's a pretty broad kind of turning back the clock. Technically, our cells have within them the capability of turning back a lot of these epigenetic alterations.
Right.
We can do it.
Just for whatever reason, a wiser intelligence above us decided to keep them off.
It was
because
probably-
maybe we would build the Tower of Babel!
In this case, the Tower of Babel might be cancer.
Oh, yeah. So basically, at a certain point, gamma rays are just going to hit us enough that, like, we would get cancer and mutate anyway.
Some people think that aging and cancer are sort of counterbalancing things. That, like, the longer you live, the more likely something's going to happen to cause cancer and make you die. And that aging is a process that happens because of all of these safeguards we've tried to build in to stop cancer from happening.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like locking cells into a certain development path and then making it so they don't divide anymore and all kinds of shit like that.
So the reason we get old is we are kind of the victims. We're in the no man's land between aging and cancer.
Maybe. I've heard other sort of similar but slightly different arguments about that, trying to explain why we bother aging at all. But we'll get into those in a little bit.
Okay, whatever. Vis-a-vis epigenetics, you were going to tell me about blowhole whales, right? Tell me why blowholes elucidate the subject.
Well, okay, so fuck, God damn it, you just made me do it too. Bowhead whales, bowhead, are the longest lived mammals that we've been able to find.
Besides Methuselah.
How long was Methuselah? Was he like 1,000 years or something?
Yeah, I mean, way longer than that. But amongst modern mammals.
Yes, the ones around right now. Bowhead whales clock in at over 200 years.
That's pretty old.
They have these differences in like how they metabolize fatty acids and their signaling through insulin. The way that they use fatty acids is sort of reminiscent of like a ketogenic diet, which I don't want to like.
Dude,
don't do it.
Ketogenic.
Anyway, they have these differences in their genome compared to some shorter-lived mammals that duplicate a lot of DNA repair genes and a lot of genes that do epigenetic stuff that can help turn back some of the epigenetic changes.
Of course, none of these epigenetic changes can help them survive the ocean getting warmer by 2 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
So,
they probably won't be around.
So fuck them.
But listen, here's the thing, is that what I was just saying about like maybe some of these are safeguards against cancer, you might then expect, oh, maybe bowhead whales have more cancer then.
These of us are like weird fucking bowhead.
Except they don't.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Frustratingly, bowhead whales actually probably have a little bit less cancer than humans do, so what the fuck is our problem?
But they also have a little less cell phones next to their head, right? Like they've got a little less microwave. And they've got a little less of Chernobyl.
Yeah, maybe it's that.
Because cancer rates have gone up in the last, 70 years. Do you think that's just because people are older now, so there's more time for cancer? Or do you think it's because of all the wackadoodle stuff that's all the chemicals, Sean, all the asbestos?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a little bit in the cancer episode, It is not because of extra stuff. It's pretty much all explained by people getting older.
So that's what Sean wants you to believe. Okay, fair enough. One way. Number 4. Remember, of 9. Loss of protopo. What? I can't say this word, Sean.
So let's take a break. When we come back, we'll do number 4, which is the loss of proteostasis.
My name is Tyler Jerry, and if you're like me, you've enjoyed the app Badger for sex. Now, we're introducing a new feature where you can get some pets fucked too. I don't know about that, sir. Okay, well, when I say that, I mean you can hire animals to have sex with your pet, as in for breeding purposes, or pleasure, hypothetically. No, of course I don't mean your pleasure. This app isn't for people having sex with animals. That's bestiality, and Tyler Jerry doesn't swing that way. Of course, if people have sex with animals, what am I supposed to do about that? No, goddammit, I don't think people will have sex with animals. Just if they do, that's not on me. You know how boys are with their jimmies, they'll stick it in anything. What are you sticking it into? Ugh, enough of this! Just download Badger and get your pets laid by other pets for breeding between themselves. Okay, guys, you're back with Petri Dish and now we're going to talk about step 4.
Loss of proteostasis. Okay, proteostasis, the proteo part is protein, and stasis is talking about keeping things the same, the right balance of proteins. And so it's about maintaining the proteins in your cells, outside of your cells, within your tissues, all that stuff.
Proteins need to fold, and they fuck up folding a lot.
Right, yeah. As that proteins are sometimes dum-dums about folding correctly, and so you have to use things called chaperone proteins to help them fold right.
Yeah, just like a prom, right? Kids trying to bang, get pregnant, okay?
Yeah.
You need a chaperone there to get in on it. Just kidding.
It's to keep them from doing the naughty touch.
Gotta stop that.
Yeah, and so look, another thing is that sometimes you can have sort of shitty proteins that have been around for too long. They've gotten kind of degraded a little bit, and it makes it so that they aren't folding very well, or they can cause kind of clumps inside of cells. There's, in Alzheimer's disease, a hypothesis called the tau hypothesis and the amyloid hypothesis, which is that Alzheimer's comes from these aggregates of protein. It's also why prion diseases might be dangerous, is because these little prion guys can go around and sort of make aggregates with one another.
Creutzfeldt-Jakob.
Yeah. Wow.
Mad cow disease.
That was good. So we want to be able to take the used up, shitty, kind of degraded proteins. We want to break them down all the way and get them out of the way, recycle them into bits that we can make new proteins with. And we want to make sure that there are enough chaperones around to make sure all the new proteins get folded properly.
Where do we do recycling? Like, does our body have a China part where we, like, send all the proteins we need to recycle? Or do we just, like, have to do it in Santa Monica?
Yeah, so there's a proteasome, and that's an organelle in your cells.
Oh, cool.
That is the China. Unless you get older, and then the proteasome doesn't work as well, and China stops taking your recycling.
Man, the proteins who have to take the other proteins, that job is hard. You get like $1 for like 7 pounds of other protein. It's bad.
As you get older, the level of chaperones in your cells goes down, and the amount of proteasome kind of degradation that goes on also goes down, even though you have plenty of proteins to degrade at that point.
Huh.
Yeah, they just seem to get shittier at it.
Well, give me some of these animal examples of weirdos.
Yeah, so there's this animal called the turquoise killifish, and they live in like these rainwater ponds. They're like dry most of the year, and then every once in a while it rains.
Yeah, how do fuckers like that even live? Because I feel like in like biology videos, they always do the first part where they're like, this frog lives in this pond that's dry most of the year. And you're like, well, how do they live? And then they cut to like a different animal. And you're like, what the fuck, man? Was it like when there's no rain?
Yeah, they have these eggs that are desiccation resistant, so they don't dry. And so they kind of stay wet while there's no water, and then the water comes, and the little fish hatch out, and they live for like 3 months. So like they don't bother having chaperones, basically.
Oh, wow.
They just like don't give a shit.
They don't live long enough for it to matter.
Yeah, so their chaperones are like super dog shit versions of chaperones that they just like don't care about doing it properly.
Yeah, I mean, what's even the point of life at that point?
I know, that's a good fucking question.
There is no intelligent design.
Exactly. It's all just a big nothing, man.
So fucking clams. What about clams?
The black clam, which is just a clam you can buy and eat.
I think that's a prog rock album.
Right.
The blackest of the clams. You know.
Arctica islandica is the longest lived non-colonial animal that has ever been confirmed.
Okay, so non-colonial, like, just like random Iroquois running around?
Like the British never fucked it kind of thing.
Yeah. The British never fucked this clam.
It's not like a sponge or something, which is a colony of things living together.
Oh, I
right?
see. Okay. It's
So-
like a discrete entity.
Right. And these discrete clams, the oldest one that they found so far is 507 years old.
Discrete clam is the sequel to that first prog rock album. Discrete clam.
So far, we're not totally sure why they can live so long.
They
but
just do.
They seem to have cell membranes that are resistant to oxidative damage, and they have very strong proteostasis. So their proteins seem to be very stable. They don't misfold very often. Their chaperones are really good, and they do a good job of, if any proteins start to get a little wonky, they break it down really quickly.
See, why is Bloomberg and Steyer spending like $100 million on like politics when they can spend $100 million on clams, baby? Immortality, bitch. Go to Mars after that.
Right. That's why, what's those dudes' names that were doing Alphabet and Google? What are those guys? Sergey Brin and some are good
Oh,
for?
Larry David? Larry Page.
Yeah.
I actually think it is a Larry.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
You're right. Yeah, those dudes, Alphabet has a company where like their whole thing is like they have colonies of naked mole rats to try to figure out how they live and do their thing.
Which we're going to get into naked mole rats later.
Yeah.
For you Kim Possible fans.
Yes. Wow. Good job.
Okay. So, guys, not only are we rhyming to a fifth topic, but these next ones are a whole separate category of weirdness. Sean, tell me about it.
Yeah, so these are antagonistic hallmarks, or things where there's kind of this dysregulation that goes on, this dysfunction. And so number 5 is deregulated nutrient sensing. And so the idea here is that insulin signaling, growth hormone signaling seems to be related to aging a lot. And so It's maybe one of the reasons why obesity is also really strongly linked to aging.
And why people with diabetes live very long.
Whoops.
The insulin signals a certain way.
Wrong!
Why they die very young.
Yes.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What about like a person who's healthy and happens to have diabetes? Like they need insulin shots, but they're like... Do you know how some people have diabetes from being obese and other people just have diabetes for weird reasons?
Yeah, so there are ways that having messed up insulin signaling can cause you to die earlier.
Wow.
So, deregulated nutrient sensing is the one that the idea of caloric restriction as a cure kind of comes from. So, I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's a lot of billionaires and stuff like that, a lot of rich people who want to live forever, and one of the ideas is to eat less food.
Right.
And that if you just take fewer calories in, you have fewer sort of insulin spikes from changes in your blood glucose level, and all in all, it kind of seems like it might make things live longer.
When we say kind of maybe makes things live longer, like how many studies substantiate that? Is this like one of those things that there's 2 cool studies that are pretty good and maybe it's the case, or is this like 15 years of research?
Right, so it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about people, we do not have very many good studies.
Right.
If you're talking about almost any other kind of thing, we actually have a lot of really good studies.
Okay.
And in those studies, it suggests caloric restriction works very well.
Okay, so, guys, this is the magic thing. Caloric restriction. You'll live longer.
So we'll have an episode on caloric restriction, but I will say that in these really good tests that they've done on things ranging from nematodes to mice to non-human primates, the amount of caloric restriction that they're chopping off is like a lot of times almost half the number of calories that like you want to take in during the day to feel
Good.
satisfied.
Okay.
So very hungry. Very, very hungry. And there's probably some like gurus and shit out in India who like meditate and stuff like that.
They've already been doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw Little Buddha.
Right.
Ken Reeves is like, may I have that bowl of rice?
Right. But for some people it sucks. It sucks big time. So
I don't like it.
It's a little hard for me to recommend the kind of caloric restriction that's in those studies for animals to just people, right?
Right.
But again, we'll talk
That's
about it
responsible.
more. We have an episode.
This is not a food, diet, medical podcast.
Right, and this isn't the episode for it anyway. We're going to have a different one.
Go.
Okay, so next thingy.
Wah, 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 wah. Mitochondrial dysfunction.
Yeah, so the mitochondria, as you are fond of saying, are the powerhouses of the cell.
Right. And this one's almost like if your dad's a breadwinner, but then he starts drinking and beating everybody in the house. Right? It's really bad.
So just the
very
mitochondria
dysfunctional.
are your dad in this case.
Yeah.
And
in a more traditional household.
and oh yeah, sure, dad or mom.
A one-income household.
Right, yes. So whoever the breadwinner is, and then they kind of get worse and worse over the years, right? Like they've been passed over for some big promotions.
Right.
They took it really hard.
Their DNA's fraying a little bit.
Yes. So because mitochondria have the electron transport chain and they're doing all of this work to make energy, they are also major producers of reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species are little oxygen atoms that are missing an electron and are kind of zipping around.
Right. They're trying to get another electron into their cloud.
Right. And they got a lot of energy. And so they can basically bond to any kind of
All
molecule
sorts
they
of
run
shit
into.
it's not supposed to bond into.
Right. Exactly. So reactive
It's
oxygen
like a drunk
species-
guy on a cruise ship, just trying to bond with something. I mean, we met a few of those guys. Like Sean's wife a lot.
Yeah.
that guy was a reactive oxygen species.
Real handsy.
He probably had gout.
So reactive oxygen species are one of the reasons why people talk about antioxidants a lot. Because
Right.
antioxidants are supposed to basically sacrifice themselves to reactive oxygen species. They can take several hits.
Remind me, what's a good example? Like, what do people consume that's high in antioxidants?
Well, vitamin C is a really common antioxidant.
So that is an antioxidant,
yeah.
and then you eat stuff that has vitamin C in it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like
yeah.
oranges.
Right. Exactly.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Or sometimes people will rub vitamin C on their skin or something because they want the
Does
antioxidant.
that work? I've never gotten the rub on skin stuff in general,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because it's like, isn't the whole point of skin is that it doesn't get in there?
I appreciate what you're saying. And we're going to have a skin episode with a skin biologist coming in.
Very sexy.
And they're going to be an expert, and then that means I get to be stupid and you get to be stupider, so it's going to be like really good.
I'll be smarter than you. I'm going to bring it out for that episode.
I like it.
History of skin.
Yeah, you're going to impress Matilde, who will be our guest. So, mitochondria, as they get older, they get progressively leakier in that they kind of lose more and more of these reactive oxygen species out into
just
the
like
rest
an
of your
abusive
cell.
father.
I thought,
Leaky.
unfortunately, you were very on point with that. So, the thing is that there's a lot of kind of ideas on what you could do about that.
So get some goop in there.
Yeah, so some people think it's like, hey, what if we just take infinite antioxidants and like super antioxidize everything? Then like we can reverse aging or something like
Which
that.
clearly has not worked yet because people are still dying.
Right, and there have been some people who say maybe we should take toxins that will attack the mitochondria earlier in life.
That doesn't sound...
Right, it's counterintuitive, but in such a way that the mitochondria recognize that they're damaged and then will put in extra work to repair themselves.
Oh.
So it's kind of like, instead of this like so slow degradation where they don't really notice that they're getting damaged over time.
Right, you're kind of reverse psychologying them.
Right, and acute damage, and then they repair themselves.
Okay.
So I don't know. But one thing I will say about this particular point in the hallmarks of aging is that there is this animal.
Right, this is one of my favorite cave dwellers. It's called Olm.
Yeah, that was good.
It's very European. It's like,
Yeah.
I met with my grandparents Alma on Olm.
Yeah. The olm, or the Proteus anguinus, also called the human fish,
Oh,
is neither human nor a fish. It's a fucking cave salamander.
that's pretty cool.
And they have a pretty long lifespan considering their size.
How long?
Jeez. I don't remember how long. I think it's like 20 years or something.
Okay, but still pretty good given that they're little fuckers in a cave.
Yeah, and salamanders don't normally live that long.
Yeah.
They like live unusually long for a salamander.
Humans don't live that long in European caves. There's witches.
Yeah.
There's trolls.
Something will eat you.
You saw Lord of the Rings?
What's interesting is that they do happen to live this long time, but they're a good counterexample to this oxidation theory because they have regular levels of oxidative stress. Their mitochondria go just as shitty as anybody else's mitochondria.
And they're not eating vitamin C left and right.
No, they are not. 'Cause
Yeah.
there are no oranges getting rolled into these European caves.
I didn't want to spell it out for an audience.
No,
okay, but that's true.
They need to know.
That's the reason.
But interestingly, these salamanders are an example of ones that feature neoteny.
Maybe.
It's the one where you keep child traits into adulthood.
Like Zoe Deschanel.
Oh my god. What the fuck?
Or Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's petulant in that movie.
Like what are those things called? Axolotls?
I said actors.
That's similar to actors. Yeah.
Axolotl.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. The other salamanders are kind of a weird type
Right.
of animal in general, really.
Right.
But those are the little amphibians in Mexico.
Right. And actually, some people think that humans are also examples of neoteny.
Yeah. Okay,
All right.
guys. Brum, 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 brum. 7. Cellular, and this is a hot word, senescence.
Yeah. Senescence is oh, you mean like hot sounding.
No, well, both. It's hot sounding and it's kind of a hot topic.
Right, exactly. And so basically what this is that, so sometimes cells will enter into this state where they're basically chilling out. They're just hanging out by the pool. They're not really working a job anymore.
I don't pay cells to freeload like that.
All right, what are they called? Neats?
They're called welfare queens.
Hikikomoris?
Yeah.
They're just sort of they're kind of riding it out. And when they enter into the state called senescence, it changes how they secrete stuff, what sorts of jobs and functions that they're doing.
Gross.
And it's usually triggered by certain kinds of damage that'll make it so that the cells don't really want to keep working and dividing because they're worried about their DNA. But it's not serious enough to make them kill themselves.
Okay.
So as time goes on, you kind of have more and more of these senescent cells just sitting around taking up space, eating a little bit of glucose every once in a while, just kind of not doing their job properly.
Right.
And it's thought that if we could increase the clearance of these senescent cells, then the other cells around that are still doing their job will kind of fill up that space, they'll divide and make up for it.
Dude, I swear, recently, my entire asshole is senescent. I've been just, trying to shit, and I know I'm pushing. But, my asshole, the rim, is like, I ain't working.
All right, let's take a break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about the final 2 hallmarks.
Woo! Hi, guys. This is Stacy Sung.
I'm a proud pet owner of a little leopard gecko named Bruce, and even though I love her, she's hard to read because she's a lizard. I never know her feelings except when she bites, but she never bites, so I never know how she feels. Luckily for me, Goop has a new line of mood crystals for pets. Just put one wherever your pet sleeps at night, and it will synchronize with its subconscious aura. It works because, well, Gwyneth says so. The crystal changes colors with your pet's mood. Now I know my little Bruce is always sleepy because the color is always green, thanks to Goop Mood Crystals. So guys, listen to Stacy's song, as in me, and go to www.goopcrystals.com/notrealad and use the promo code Petri Dish to get 10% off your Goop purchase.
Okay, guys. Whoa! Now we're on 8. Stem cell exhaustion.
Yeah, so stem cells are the main kinds of cells that will divide to make new cells in your body once you're an adult.
They're famously also known as soul cells because they're the souls of a fetus.
What the fuck?
Well, isn't that why Republicans didn't want to use them or something?
Oh, maybe. Now that you mention it, maybe that's the only good reason that they could possibly have for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, adult stem cells are these cells that are throughout your adult body that normally aren't dividing most of the time. But if they're needed, they can receive signals to start dividing to replace cells that you've lost. Once stem cells go kaput, like if you run out of stem cells in an area where you're supposed to have them in what's called a niche, a stem cell niche, then you're not going to be able to regenerate that tissue anymore.
Okay, so why do some organs like livers have stem cells, and then organs like hearts, which seem important, we just didn't give them stem cells? What's up with that? Or like brains, why are brains all fucked?
Right, okay, so what I will say is that brains actually probably do have stem cells in some of their areas.
God, it doesn't feel like it. I need more of those fast.
Well, so it's just, for a very long time, we did think that, like the heart, the brain was not capable of making new neurons once you were done going through development.
Right.
And childhood, basically.
But then we saw Joe Biden change from the third to the fourth debate. And we're like, there's stem cells somewhere.
He can learn! Yeah, so there are stem cells in the brain. Why there aren't stem cells in the heart versus any other kind of place, it's a good question. It's really not clear, what the choice behind all of that would be. Your heart stands up surprisingly well, considering the fact that it's always beating all the time for your entire life until you're dead.
Yeah, but until you're dead. And sometimes that's because of the heart.
Sometimes, but a lot of other things can give out first.
That's true.
One thing I will say is that there is a thought that tissues that have more stem cells are more likely to have cancer. Which is one of the reasons why there is pretty much not a heart cancer. It's kind of not really an option as a primary tumor site. And that might be because there are no stem cells there. Huh. And so maybe there is this kind of balancing act again between where you're willing to have the risk of cancer versus the desire for regeneration.
Right, heart cancer, bad. So maybe we don't want to risk the stem cells.
Right, and the liver, it might be that the need for stem cells was so high that you were willing to accept the risk of cancer because the liver is where you're detoxifying a lot of shit.
Early monkeys are just getting drunk fucking constantly. And then we evolved livers that are oh, Nelly! We gotta clear this out. And they were right.
And bone marrow. Bone marrow has a lot of stem cells
to
keep replenishing your blood and everything like that. So, it's just some of these places you kind of really do need to have the stem cells.
That's why marrow is so yummy. Has extra stem cells.
It's because it's sort of fatty in there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so some animals don't ever lose their regenerative capacity. As in, they have stem cells in a lot of different places, and those stem cells never really seem to poop out.
Sure. Okay?
So, for example, there are these animals called planaria. They're a species of flatworm. And they have these cute little eye spot things. If you guys want to look up a picture of a planaria, they're actually kind of cute. And they're interesting because, they have organs, they have a body plan, right? But if you take them and you cut them up into a lot of different pieces, they'll regrow into planaria again.
Okay.
They're kind of infinitely regenerative, pretty much. So one of the ways you can use them in labs, literally, instead of having to breed mice or something like that to make new mice, you can just take one planaria and chop it up into pieces, and then you'll have a bunch of planaria after a few days. Pretty useful. And it's sort of strange in a sense that, like, if you wanted to clone a planaria, all you have to do is cut it in half. Like, why is it able to have so much regeneration?
What would we have to do to humans to get us to that place?
Right. That's a really good question. It
seems like a lot.
It's the reason why planaria are studied in labs, is because they want to know what is the pathway that helps these cells recognize how much was lost, what needs to be rebuilt, right? Why is it that, you can lose a certain percent of a lobe of your liver and then have things kind of regrow back in, but you can't lose like any percent of your arm and have it regrow, right?
I mean, you know the answer, right, Sean?
No.
Midichlorians.
Fuck.
I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but in the photo, in the very middle, the darker part, that's a midichlorian. Each planaria has a little midichlorian in it, and that's canonical.
Do you even like Star Wars?
I'm on and off. I kind of liked The Mandalorian.
Okay.
And not for Baby Yoda, okay? I liked it not before it was cool. But I liked it without caring about Baby Yoda.
Oh, I see.
I do think it's funny that after all these movies, Baby Yoda's doing the Force, and everyone's like, look at that black magic that baby does. And it makes sense. I mean, I actually appreciate it, like, in terms of the universe's lore. But it is also like, bros, there's like 3 Disneyland resorts and like 85 movies a year with the Force. It's kind of funny in a dissonant way.
Yeah, that's why it's fun. Okay. Another example of a highly regenerative organism is this jellyfish, the Pteropsis dorini. Or Dorny?
An ancient tribe who conquered Dorne.
It's an immortal jellyfish, or a squishy water phoenix, if you want to think about it that way. They basically go through this cycle of rebirth over and over again.
Is squishy water phoenix just what you call it? Like, why is it the way I want to think about it?
That's my name for it. Squishy water phoenix. So these jellyfish have a life cycle. They go from being these little guys that are kind of polyps that will stick to the sea floor, and they'll look kind of like sea anemones. And then eventually they'll kind of detach from the sea floor, flip over, and then become jellyfish.
Yeah, I've heard of these guys, and then they can just redo it.
Yeah. Yes, they can.
That's pretty cool.
And they can do it over and over again if they want. And in the process, like if they're old and hurt in the jellyfish form, they can basically reverse their cells back into a stem cell state. So they're just like a goop of stem cells, and then go back to being polyps and then jellyfish again.
Damn. Okay. Hibba-dabba! Number 9.
Let's keep changing.
Altered intercellular communication, guys.
Yes, I think the big one here, the big one is inflammatory signaling, which increases as you get older. So as you get older, you're just kind of
what's
more...
inflammatory signaling?
Inflammatory signaling is sort of like when your immune cells, like your white blood cells and everything, are sending out all of these little protein signals to each other to do things like give you an upset stomach and a fever and aches and pains and shit like that. Sort of like all the symptoms of a flu, really.
Okay. And that getting fucked up is a big part of aging.
Yes, as you get older and older, you'll just have more spots that are inflamed. It's one of, like your joints start hurting and shit like that.
Right, okay, sure. Like arthritis is an example of this.
Right. Yes. And we'll actually talk about arthritis and everything.
And penile turgidity.
Huh? No? What? Why? Why are you bringing up penile turgidity?
Okay.
You're not wearing pants. You need to keep that locked down.
That's true. I'm not wearing pants.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I see you have like 18 pages of notes on naked mole rats.
Yeah.
What's up, Sean? What are you trying to say?
Okay. Naked mole rats are like a really weird animal. And so they get tossed around as a model organism for aging to try to figure that shit out. But the more I read about them, the more weird they got. And so I
got into
a lot of notes. Yeah. But you know these naked mole rats, right? You know what they look like. They're kind of these...
Yeah, they're like baggy pinkies.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't have any hair.
With like fucking dirty front teeth.
They're more or less blind. They have very, very low tolerance for UV radiation.
Sure, they mostly live underground.
Exactly.
In Africa.
But then they also have very, very high tolerances for toxic compounds.
Because you dig around the dirt, sometimes you eat a toxic compound.
Yes, yeah. They sort of have these really different circulating metabolites, fatty acid levels, amino acid levels. Like their bodies seem to go through metabolism in a way that's different from how we normally do it. So they have an increased level of short-chain fatty acids, which is something they get from their microbiome.
Ketone diet.
Maybe.
Oh, really? I was just saying stuff.
there's a certain aspect of their metabolites that's like sort of reminiscent of ketogenesis, but whatever.
Damn, dude, keto is smart.
I don't like it.
You
Anyway,
don't like it?
Well, we'll talk about it. So the thing is, rodents don't normally live very long. They'll usually live maybe like 2 to 4 years.
That was the big problem with Redwall.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But the thing is that naked mole rats live much longer than that, past their 30s. And they show almost no signs of aging until they're like 25 out of their 30, let's say. So that'd be kind of like a human being being in sort of like preteen status until they were 64. And then very rapidly becoming as if they were like 80 years old.
Yeah, Luke Perry.
Yeah, like Luke Perry. But I'm talking about humans more in general. And it's a little complicated because I picked preteen as my example. But most naked mole rats never mature sexually because they live in like a hive with like a queen, you know? So they're like ants, basically.
Gross.
Except they're rats, which is
Gross.
strange. But basically, they have this really weird aging curve where for most of their life, they don't really change very much.
Right.
Unlike us, where we kind of have this sort of gradual but relatively linear change over time. We're like, changing. We'll have these kind of spurts every once in a while of like growth, puberty and shit.
Right.
And then somewhere around the 40s or 50s,
The aging kicks in.
it starts coming in exponentially.
Right.
Our all-cause mortality starts really shooting off.
Right.
And so it would be interesting if we could sort of change our curve too, to kind of keep it from going exponential for longer.
Right.
And maybe naked mole rats will have a clue to that. They also don't really seem to get cancer, which is interesting.
That's
and
super
a little
cool.
weird. And they have all of these kind of liver proteins that are responsible for detoxification. So some people think maybe preventing these toxins from being around is something that has to do with aging.
Hey, so what's an example of a toxin? Because, like at work, people will be like, oh, I gotta cleanse the toxins. And I'm like, it sounds all Dr. Strangelove-y to me. Like, what's an actual toxin that, like, is a naturally occurring toxin that, like, a naked mole rat might eat and need to get cleared out?
Naturally occurring toxin. You can end up eating bits of, like, ethanol or methanol or something like that. Like, there's naturally occurring alcohol.
I mean, I purposely eat all sorts of ethanol.
And they get detoxified successfully.
Okay, so alcohol would be an example of a toxin.
Right. There are also things that are like phenolic compounds and stuff. Stuff that like...
Phenol?
Some plants might make
Flaccid dick.
that we wouldn't normally think very much of as toxins, but to your body biologically might get treated as toxins.
What's an example? Basil.
I mean, let's say limonene.
The fuck is limonene?
It's the thing that makes lemons smell kind of lemony.
Oh, okay. That's
like-
interesting.
Yeah, that kind of...
So lemon is toxic.
Well, it's just that particular compound gets broken down. It gets detoxified.
I see. So, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so naked mole rats are really good at clearing that shit out.
Yeah, they're really good at clearing that out. They're interesting when we look in the context of a lot of these other hallmarks I said, right? Because it's like, okay, they do this pretty good job with their aging. How does that compare to some of our other ideas, right? So, for example, they seem to have about the same number of senescent cells, but they put their cells into senescence mode earlier than, like, compared to rats. They have pretty high levels of reactive oxygen species, so it doesn't seem like antioxidants really matter for them either. So, all in all, naked mole rats, a little bit confusing, but maybe studying them more, like they're doing over there at Alphabet. I think the company's called Calico. That's like the company owned by Alphabet that's
Okay.
doing naked mole rat research.
Calico, okay.
Maybe they'll figure something out.
Okay, guys. Well, if you're curious about the secrets of aging, or about how all this applies ultimately to humans, then you should check out our next episode on Aging Humans Edition. And also, you should support our burgeoning research in naked mole rats on Patreon. We're going to have all sorts of YouTube videos of Sean playing with naked mole rats and doing naked mole rat things and dressing up. And
I wish that were true.
Queen.
But I don't get to play with naked mole rats. Anyway, patreon.com/petri dish. That was good, Nathan.
Sign up.
And then we have Twitter @dishpodcast.
Talk.
You can email us at petridishpod@gmail.com. Should say thank you to Stacy.
Thank you. And thank you to Brian Allen, the art man.
And thank you to you guys, our listeners.
Ich benign science.
See you next time.
Da da